Hello, I'm Ishtar Howell. I'm a monk, meditation teacher, and intuitive.
What is the soul?
The soul is actually well understood as your essential song in the universal symphony. It's your individualized spark of God.
What is the soul's relation to Source/God?
The soul is like the fingertips of the hand that is God. The soul is the infinite or God's way of expressing itself into multiplicity so that it can interact with itself again. The soul is essentially the vehicle for God to expand itself.
Are human incarnations voluntarily chosen?
Yes, they seem to be. It's very strange, but it seems to be the case. You might be existing at much larger levels than you're conscious of. And at those larger levels of magnitude, you in fact did choose to cast the die in this sort of way, usually for a profound benefit not only to yourself, but to all of creation.
What's the purpose of life on the physical plane?
I mean, if I'm going to be really honest, I'd have to say that the purpose of this whole dance is really to play and dance and sing in the ineffable, in the aspect of life that human language just cannot touch. We can put a lot of words to that: bliss, magic, love. These are some of the favored words of myself. There are others that others might like, but really those are all just fingers pointing at the moon. What we're going towards is the experience of a wholeness that we all know deep inside, that we knew when we were infants, that we've known when we've had peak experiences. And when we're in that space, all the tumblers of the key of life are in place. That is the telos of life, and thus that is the purpose of this whole thing, to dance in the original wholeness, to return to our original innocence.
Why would a soul choose to leave heaven?
Why come here? Why not go to the bliss of heaven? Well, the answer is very simple: because right here, right now is heaven. The kingdom of heaven is truly right here. That's why we come here. I think it's kind of like maybe a very, very difficult game of Where's Waldo? Or in some ways, it's like we're living through the Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham. There's no denying that there are horrible aspects of human life. There have been horrible situations. But for some of us even awakened to that wholeness, to that indescribable thing in the midst of them. This whole life is a game of finding the deathless deep inside, which cannot be affected by harm to the body, by harm to the emotions, uh, by the cessation of life. We're here to find the timeless and the deathless no matter what occurs. We don't have a choice.
Do souls have more than one incarnation, either on Earth or elsewhere?
Yeah, I tend to think that we have many incarnations. I tend to think this simply because as a child, I used to phase out of my little body and I'd find myself in a completely different adult human body at the time in a different situation. And then all of a sudden I would phase back into this one. And I remember my mother saying, "Where'd you go this time? Did you go into your bigger body again?" I said, "Yeah, I guess I went into my bigger body." There's another occasion I was sitting down to pot a plant at a client's house. I worked many years as a gardener, and as I was sitting down to my table to do this, I sat down with my hands in a particular way. Suddenly looking at my hands, I realized this is odd. When I sit down at tables, I tend to have my hands in a position as if I'm about to play a piano. And in that moment, I went from being outside in a backyard in Portland, Oregon, to being in a completely surrounded by a early 18th or late 17th chamber music venue, and I was sitting down with laced sleeves and a different coat in front of an early Italian piano forte with a audience behind me about to start the keys, and just as much as I was there, the complete scene went away and I was back in Portland, Oregon. Now, I'm the type of person who sort of likes to keep his feet on the ground, and I don't really make a big fuss about those sorts of things, but they've come again and again to the point where, paired with reading the research of people like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, I tend to think that reincarnation is as interesting a framework to explain those things as any.
Does the soul plan its incarnations ahead of time?
Again, I tend to think so, uh, for my own reasons. Even without reading the very, very interesting accounts of different parapsychologists and different people seem to be experiencing this stuff, I remember often as a child when I would be going to sleep and in that liminal state between waking and sleeping, and sometimes in the other way, between being asleep and being awake, I would be in this sort of meta realm beyond this timeline, and I would be consulting with these beings, and they would be talking. We'd be looking at this whole plan, kind of a multi-dimensional plan of my life, and once in a while, what was interesting was that sometimes in these recollections, we'd be talking about events in my life that hadn't yet happened, and suddenly then 2, 3 years down the line, or 6 weeks down the line, they would happen. Another interesting occasion was when I was 17. I was walking through the Walmart, and I was trying to decide what college I would go to, what I was going to do with my life in the next few years. I was pretty stumped, actually. And so I just kind of asked the universe, hey, where am I going to be in a year from now? And to my great surprise, a sort of a TV screen type thing appeared in the space in front of me. And there was a narrator, and it was saying, well, in fact, you're going to be working in a mostly vegetarian, except for the meat cafe, with a bunch of monks, many of whom wear all white. You'll start out as the dishwasher and be trained in all the jobs up the way, and eventually be trained as the chef. And I saw the whole scene. I was looking out kind of like a restaurant ticket window. There was a brunette, a woman in white behind the bar, and a man wearing all red walking in front. And then the vision ended, and I thought, oh, not very likely. And I just kind of la-di-da went on with my teenage life. About a year later, I was on the phone to an interview to be allowed into a monastery. The last thing that the person on the phone said was, oh, by the way, we're about to open up a cafe. There might be a job for you. And at that point, I was like, I remembered that vision in the Walmart, and I didn't tell them that that was the case. I wanted to keep it close to my chest. And about a year after that, as I was at that ticket window, looking out, the exact scene from a year before played before my eyes. I was like, hot damn. So there's been a lot more where that came from, but those sorts of experiences of precognition, including of my mother's death, tend to make me believe that there's some kind of pre-planning in place, and that there's something that, to a certain extent, that's the case.
Do we have soul groups that we incarnate with across different lifetimes?
Oh, do we ever have soul groups? Yeah, that's the case. I'm going to have to answer this with another story. Uh, at my old ashram, each time I would hear, not every time I would hear somebody's name that I haven't met yet, I wouldn't, my ears wouldn't necessarily perk up. But with a few of them, they absolutely perked up without me knowing anything else about this person. With one of these folks, I remember the day he came in and I met him for the first time. I was in like 4 months of a long meditation retreat, so I was in a different kind of realm altogether. We walk into the room, and at the same time, with talking to each other, uh, he said, with a thick Alabama accent, which I can't quite reproduce, "You," and I said, "That face." And it was like we were mutually struck by lightning. And my God, it was very, very rare to have that. But we looked at each other, and it was as if mutually both of us had some kind of multi-lifetime history, all the emotions, all the highs, all the lows of it dumped on us at the same instant. And what a way to meet somebody. It brings me back to when I actually first showed up at this ashram, which was indeed one of the, I think, the biggest nodal points of this life. And it's at those nodal points where I think we often find our deepest soul family when we're going into that kind of octave. But I remember opening up the door, and for the most part, one pair of eyes, one face after the next was sending me into a precipitously deeper deja vu experience that made all of realities feel like it was ringing with the sound of Om. So to me, those are the strong indications of the existence of soul groups, and including also when you meet someone you know everything about them, and you have no reason to, and it's vice versa. That's some pretty thick magic. No, they're not always our friends, at least not on the surface. Sometimes you meet a soul group friend, it might not be mutual, sometimes it is, but both of you just want to beat the hell out of each other. And it's instant, and everybody knows that it's for no reason in particular, even if you try to produce some. It's that kind of chemistry. And sometimes those, especially if you're in a situation where there's sort of an understanding that we're going for the same type of growth trajectory, like a monastery or an ashram or a help group or something like that. Those are sometimes the most potent relationships for growth that you can find. The ones where it's just sandpaper, and then it's kind of sandpaper going against each other, or iron sharpening iron, so to speak. And then you don't have to. Sometimes you just say like, "Hey, nice meeting you. I'll see you in 2 lifetimes. Bye," and that's okay.
Are there contracts or agreements between souls?
I absolutely believe that there are contracts or agreements between souls, and I think their purposes are varied. In my own case, one of the closest relationships, I think soul group relationships in my life, was my own mother. Looking back, I never had any reason to distrust her. She was a great person, but as a child, I had sort of a almost like a native distrust. And as I grew older, it seemed that distrust started to soften. I remember at age 13, that distrust had sort of fully gone away. But it was at that point that she died in a car accident, and I lost her. And it was as if that openness that had developed over uh, 12 years was just crushed, absolutely crushed. Now, the interesting thing about that was, funnily enough, for that whole time, uh, I had a sense that there was some kind of impending tragedy in my life. I never thought it had anything to do with my mother. I thought it would do with my father, or something like that. And after that accident, I realized that, uh, you know, there was such a sense that it was scripted, like so many other things in my life. And I realized I would never, if she had lived, I would never have so quickly gone in the direction of becoming a meditator, or going to a monastery. I would have been too happy. I would have been too relatively happy. I would have certainly lived in much shallower waters here. I would have been satisfied with them than I would have ended up doing had she died. And so in many ways, it was so, for me, it was so patently obvious to understand that we had made this arrangement, and that I needed to go and do this thing. Years later, I was in my deep retreat, a deep 6-month meditation teacher training. I remember one day, just any old day, I was walking, had to go to the bathroom, washing my hands. I look up into the mirror, and in a very non-spooky way, my mother's face was staring out of my own face. Not because of a simple biological resemblance, but really some a weird meta combination of her face and my face. I felt her presence. I smelled her perfume, which I hadn't had a memory of for years. And in that moment, it was as if there was this communication between us where she was telling me, yeah, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. I'm so glad that you did this. I'm so glad that you put in the work to let your soul shine forth, to free it through discovering the source of all that is. So I think there's many other purposes that people have in many relationships, and this one between mine and my mother was native to this experience.
Do spirit guides or angels assist us?
This I actually have some jokes around. I believe they assist us quite a bit. Sometimes people have much more active intervention in their lives. I remember this was a bizarre thing from my childhood. I was being chased by some guys. They were kind of wanting to sort of like beat me up. I don't know who started it. It could have been me. But anyways, they were chasing me. I was running. Suddenly, I found myself falling forward. I tripped on something. My head was not going to land in a very good place. Then I experienced two bizarre things. One, I experienced some kind of force grabbing my arms, lifting them up. And two, I experienced a kind of a missing time because there was a cut. I went straight from my head was about to land into, I think a sharp thing or a hard rock on the ground. And then straight to, I'm about 8 feet ahead of where I would have fallen, and I'm back on my feet. And I stopped after 4 strides because just what had happened. I looked behind me. The boys who were chasing me were freaked out, standing with their mouths open. And to this day, this was first grade. I haven't gotten what actually happened from anybody. It was very strange. But my sense was that either some kind of siddhi from my own consciousness uh, guided me forward, or there was some kind of angelic intervention, and I'm not really concerned uh, which one of it there is. Uh, Oftentimes, as a child, I often, in my case, I saw a lot of spirits, and that to a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old, uh, even older than that, it's not necessarily comfortable. I didn't want that. I really didn't like. It's not glamorous. I didn't like discarnate spirits coming in and kind of frightening me. And then I just prayed. I asked for help, and I was pretty soon some couple angels came down and kind of worked as bodyguards, and they apparently found other bodyguards to make sure that only ones who really wanted to move on to the other side would come in the room, and also that they had good intentions, and so I count that as angelic help as well.
What is the veil of forgetting and why do we need it?
What is the veil of forgetting, and why do we need it? Uh, as Shakespeare said, the play is a thing. I think it's essential in some way to forget for most of us. The veil of forgetting seems to be the necessary mechanism to make our journey meaningful. There seems to be something interesting to the divine about making a play of things and coming back, forgetting and coming back. Well, think of it this way. If a prince wants to grow by having a very, very different experience than the life of a prince, it's very, very helpful for them to be fully immersed in the character of a beggar or a wandering mendicant. If they remember the whole time that they have this huge palace, diamonds, treasure, all sorts of stuff, uh, they will not have the juice to fully immerse themselves into the challenges of that life. And so this is the metaphor for all of us. It's the King Pellinore story from the Arthurian legends, as we've forgotten this, that we have this diamond in our pocket, sitting back there the whole time. And I think there's something about getting lost that God revels in. And I don't think there's any way that without that God can really fully know itself in all places without it.
Discuss the role of free will in a given incarnation.
Well, honestly, this is a stumper for me. because I think that both determinism and free will probably miss the mark of what's actually happening, and that's just due to our language is not able to fully grasp things. But if we're talking about free will, there seems to be some magic, even if it's just an illusion of choice. There seems to be some magic of affirming what is true with a capital T, in no matter what's going on. When you do that, that truth expands. Free will is basically an affirming of what is true. That's the highest value of free will, if it has one. When you know silence and you come into a situation where you're completely challenged, and every instinct in you is to run away, or put your fists up in defense, or try to avoid the reality as it is, when your button's getting pushed. And when all of that's happening and you're still able to find that sliver back into presence, or back into silence, or into a genuine non-reactive mode, when you're able to find peace in a hurricane, and we're going to call that an action of free will, well, that is exponential growth. And that is, I think, the most beneficial essence and purpose of having free will, is to affirm what is true with a capital T and what is real with a capital R.
Is life on the physical plane an illusion?
On one level it is, but on the greater level it isn't. There's this wonderful old saying, first there's a mountain, then there's no mountain, then there's a mountain again. What that essentially means is, well, the first mountain, your experience of reality is completely confused by all sorts of conditioning that you've adopted. So functionally, you have so many filters going on that you don't see anything straight. Often this is what is referred to as the illusory nature of existence, but it's not really endemic to existence itself. Then the second part, we've got the no mountain phase. Well, we have to clean out the crud. You have to engage in some kind of practice, or maybe no practice, maybe it just happens, but there needs to be some kind of event or some kind of process where the conditioning gets sorted out. But then what's this thing about the mountain coming back? Well, the mountain that comes back is not all the garbage that we've jettisoned in the no mountain period. We're actually seeing the magnificence of objective reality as if we're babies walking into a new world. Another way of looking at this is we find in our own inner experience. At first, we might be identified with this little tiny self who lives 2 inches behind the forehead, and we're seeing life through that, and we're reacting and doing all that. We don't think we have an alternative. Then we magically find an alternative. We find ourselves in presence, in peace, in the peace that passes all understanding, in samadhi, in silence, many words for the same thing. That gives us another door. As we go and step through that door, again and again and again, we eventually realize that, that TV over there, the chair over there, the person that annoys us, the person that we love, that all of these things are actually that same infinite that we've just discovered. We see the mountain again.
Do we create our own realities?
Well, there's probably different ways, but the most powerful, and I think most worthwhile way of creating your own reality begins with finding the source of all things within, finding that deathless and eternal flavor, facet, whatever you want to call it, of totality and consciousness. And when you're going into that place, it's the I is being merged with the all. And when the I merges with the all, this is where the term getting out of your own way really comes into play. And when you get out of your own way, all those things that your heart had wanted, not all of them come true, but the ones that are supposed to come true, the ones that are supported by the all, tend to come true. And that's the deepest and cleanest, really, way of going about creating your own reality, getting square and finding the truest spot inside yourself.
Describe the life between lives.
Well, I can only draw from my own subjective experience, or I can draw from the books I've read, but we'll keep to my own experience. And play and planning and lots of dancing. In those moments when I seem to have, in this life, wandered into some kind of timeless space where this life and other lives were being planned, the considerations, the scope of the consciousness involved was so vast that it was all a dance. And the ideas that I could understand with my mind were like, well, let's put this experience here, because if we put this experience here, what a beautiful ripple that'll cause. It was almost more like a musical piece was being artistically created, or a painting. The life was a painting, or the life was a musical piece, not some kind of steeplechase for a soul to encounter obstacles to learn in some kind of crypto-Protestant framework. It wasn't about work, it was about beauty. And so what we're doing in between lives is we are, are communing with the universe as the universe, and deciding together what is the most beautiful painting of a life we could create. What is the song that wants to be sung?
Are we judged or punished for our mistakes in the afterlife?
We're absolutely not judged or punished for our mistakes. Uh, Things are seen completely as they are. And there seem to be corrective methods, but those corrective methods are not punitive at all. There's no feeling of that whatsoever. It's a completely objective and yet completely loving flavor of consciousness, which is looking at this life and deciding what needs to happen, where and how, and what will make it the most true and the most beautiful.
Is there such a thing as hell?
There's no place where the bad or the wrong, or the terminally broken are put. There's no objective pen for the uh, those people to be punished in. There really is no hell in that sense. But yeah, people can have mind-created hell experiences if they seem to need that. And if they've decided, I would say, at a deeper level that somehow they need to go through that, then they will. But no, not in the old sense of flames for eternity.
Describe the life review.
This was something I was always fascinated by as a kid, and so then when it happened in my case at age 13, it was wonderfully bizarre. The entire life, I can only speak to my own experience here. The entire life went back like a seamless reel of film, all the way to the inception, a little bit before. And in that process, every moment was there completely lucidly. In fact, more lucid than I'd experienced it in the first place. There was also this completely objective aspect of consciousness that I had known throughout life, but often wanted to stay away from, because it would usually come in and say, like, that's not a good idea. But here in that experience, I was completely coming into union with it. And we would look at different things, and it would say, look, there was fear. There you acted out of pretense. There you were tight and you didn't need to be. There you behaved this way and you didn't need to be. And it was like being massaged having my soul massaged from the inside. It was as if going through the process, there was an invisible skin that had been covering me my whole life that I had no idea was there. And as we went through the life review, all the weight came off, and we found that the entire life was basically made of love the entire time. So the life review process in this case was a process of clarification, clarifying what actually is life made of, what is really going on. What we found at the end, what I was instructed by this totally objective aspect of consciousness was, you were home the whole time. You were loved the whole time. All of it, everywhere.
What is karma?
Well, actually, I like to talk about karma in a slightly different way than it's bandied about, and I think it's more correct. Often, karma is framed as some kind of multi-lifetime system of punitive judgment. Really, most karma, and there's a certain aspect of that, but the majority of karma is created when, I would say, the universe or God or goddess or whatever you want to call it is offering us an experience which is made of love, and we push it away. And infinite intelligence and all its compassion and wisdom says, "Oh, you don't want this now? No problem. I'll get it to you in Istanbul in 1648 if you don't want it now, and if you don't want it then, we've got millions of other times that you can accept this parcel of love." Eating karma is essentially taking everything into love, taking everything into presence. Karma is created often through resistance of what is. And I don't mean by saying no, because saying no is often saying yes, and we have to have boundaries. What I really mean here is the eternal yes, when we can be in presence, fully present with life, and fully in the moment. That creates no karma. We create karma by pushing life away.
How do you define forgiveness?
Forgiveness is coming back into wholeness. Forgiveness is a release of some kind of near or ancient grasping, which is causing us to be out of step with the wholeness that we actually are. So any act of forgiveness is an act of coming back, relinquishing that grasp, that protective grasping really is relinquishing that and falling back into that numinous whole. That's forgiveness.
Discuss the idea of oneness/unity and how we can apply it in our everyday lives.
Oneness is actually really who we really are. Now that sounds like a funny sentence. Oneness is who we are. What does that actually mean? Well, what it means is that when you relax, when you're able to, whether through meditation or prayer or really good bath or something like that, when we're able to relax, at the bottom of that deep relaxation, at the bottom of that is an experience of where I and thou disappears, where self and world disappears. That is our goal. Now, how to apply that? Well, the first part of the application of that is to systematically take ourselves back into that so it sticks around. That's the first part, and that's the longest part. But if you are inclined to do that and you diligently follow whatever path you discover to go in that direction, then the application comes as almost a byproduct. When you stabilize in that, the dance of life that you were meant to perform starts to come out. And then it just becomes a matter of, are you willing to let the dance of life come through you? Are you willing to go take that step? And if the answer is yes, well, that's the application of that oneness. Is first you go into oneness, and then you let that oneness direct you where it will. And then you expand the oneness.
What does the belief in separation cost us?
A lot of joy. Yeah, the belief in separation or the tension, the sense that where this little person who's what I like to call the biographical self. I don't think that's my term originally. It certainly isn't. But the belief in the biographical self as the whole, well, it's just like trying to put on a size 5 shoe when we've got a size 14 foot. And that when we're only identified with that, that's just suffering. So obviously what it costs us is all this just joy. It's a killjoy. Joy, love, bliss, health, all of it is challenged by only knowing ourselves as this little box dwelling person. And there's nothing wrong with the ego function. We don't have to destroy the ego function. It's really just a matter of recontextualizing it through experience. And what is the experience that causes it to recontextualize? Well, the experience that puts it in its proper place is going back into samadhi, going back into wholeness, going back into the now. And if we do that enough times, things kind of shift around into a much more ideal homeostasis.
What, where is heaven? What, where is God?
Well, heaven is really right here. It's when I say right here, what I mean is it is, and it is right here in a sense that most of us often miss it. Why do we miss it? We miss it because we're too tight. We miss it because we were taught to constrict ourselves in ways to only identify with this little biographical self. That tension that comes from that alone is what makes us miss all the wonders that are around us that we can't see. So this is what Jesus and many great mystics in their own different ways skirting around it really mean by saying the kingdom of heaven is here and now. Kingdom of heaven is right here. Uh, this is that is the essence of everything. It's hidden in plain sight. And what is heaven? Well, heaven is wholeness. For a human being, that's what heaven is. Heaven is relaxing into wholeness. It is relinquishing the attempt to control what can't be controlled. It is a loosening of that tension. Now, what is God? If you could put a name to that which cannot be named, that ineffable dimension of human existence, that really the wholeness itself, it's another name for it, but yes, if we could put a name on that, we'd either use the word God or we'd use the word love. In English, those seem to be the best words for that which has no words attached to it. And that's what God is. God is the first form of the formless. Love is the first form of the formless. It is the subtle water that we are meant as drops to merge into.
Many believe we're shifting to a higher consciousness on this planet. Do you agree? And if so, can you describe this shift?
Yeah, I believe we are. Why do I think that? It's somewhat, well, it's quite anecdotal and subjective. But when I started as a meditation teacher 20 years ago, um, often at my classes, I'd be going in, and really people, at least they self-reported that they didn't really know the experience of wholeness all that much. Now, 20 years on, when I'm teaching people, yeah, yeah, they know wholeness as an experience, not just up in their head, but they know it in here. They know it in there more and more and more and more. And I don't think this is just related to me changing and attracting different types of students. I really do think that this is something objective. So yeah, I think things are heating up. Uh, I don't know how that's going to translate into world events. I tend to, not be so concerned with that. But I do have a sense that the more people experience the deathless, which they seem to be right now, the more people experience the deathless and the infinite aspect of their own consciousness, the less prone they are to be afraid. The less prone people are to being afraid and to falling into sort of those sorts of patterns. I tend to think that the human realm tends to be much more pleasant, if not simply palatable. So there you have it.
What's the secret to remembering who we really are?
Well, there's all sorts of ways. How do we remember who we really are? It's interesting that we have to remember it all. It's interesting that we have to do anything because who we really are is right in front of our face, but I guess that's part of the challenge. In my life, taking up a practice of meditation and yoga was the most efficacious means of finding that place, but there are other methods. Whatever really works for you.
What does our soul want us to know?
Well, I think our soul wants us to know a number of things, but I think the universal answer for most of us is that you're home already, that you have always been loved, that in fact you're made of love, that the source of love has been inside you the whole time, that you really don't have to change yourself in a major way to be worthy of love because you've been worthy the whole time. And I think those sentences tend to constellate around sort of a message that the soul has that can't exactly be put into words. And it just wants to remind us, you're the wholeness, you're everything, you're home.
Is there a positive message or message of hope you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, that message is simply that you are love. No matter what you've done, no matter what's happening, uh, every thought, every emotion, every sensation you're having right now, or that you've ever had before, or that you ever shall have, all of those things are, in fact, if you reduce them down totally, they are God. You are nature naturing. You are the universe playing itself. All you have to do is relax, 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 and step by step, don't try to make it all in one go, but step by step, little by little, come back into that space. It's not that far away. It's really not that far at all.